Hey kids, do you want to watch me fumble through an install? Stay tuned. Today, we are installing air compressors. Now, I have been wanting an air system in my vehicles for a really long time because when we hit the trails, every time we have to air back up again, it takes me so long to get my tires reinflated. One time I had to borrow my friend's air compressor, and it was just one of those regular sized car air compressors that you would buy at like Lowe's. And it took so long that it overheated the air compressor, and I'm like, I'm never doing this again. Needless to say, I've been needing an air system in both of these vehicles, but the only reason I hadn't pulled the trigger yet was because I couldn't decide if I wanted to go the air compressor route or the air tank route. And I'm sure a lot of you are having the same dilemma. However, now I found a way to have both. Enter TJM. Now, unless you're a hardcore overlander who pretty much knows all the brands that are out there, chances are, if you live here in the United States, you may not have heard of this Australian company before. And that's okay if you've never heard of them, because honestly, TJM is only now making their way into the US market. But if you think they're just some new startup company, well, you should know that TJM just celebrated their 50th anniversary, and they also share half the market with ARB in Australia. Yes, that ARB. The same ARB that a lot of you know I love, but learning about TJM and all the products that they offer, I'm finding some stuff that might actually be better. Now, if you follow my videos, then you'll know that on this last Max Tracks trip, I was also there with TJM, and I learned a lot about their air compressors as well as their other products, but it was the air compressors that really got me excited, because now I get to have not only the air compressor part of it, but also the air tank part of it, which gives me the best of both worlds. Oh, you have to see this. Take a look at this. It just looks so good. And you know, I'm a sucker for the whole yellow and black color combination. This is the look I've been wanting. Like, it fits my scheme so perfectly. And it's not just yellow, it's like this sparkly yellow that is almost gold. It comes with mounting brackets that will allow you to mount this horizontally. You can mount it horizontally or vertically, whichever way you choose. Comes with all the wiring harnesses as well as a switch, and it's also pre-wired already if you want to use it for your air locker. I know you're probably asking right now, okay, well, how does this compare to the other air compressor from the other company that we're not gonna talk about? Well, here are some specs directly from TJM. This produces 170 LPM, or liters per minute, which equals to 6 CFM, which is cubic feet per minute. 100% duty cycle to 80 PSI, and that's the thing that impressed me the most. 100% duty cycle, which means that it's gonna give you that constant PSI for, I believe, 60 minutes. 100% of the time. It's not going to be sputtering on you. The PSI is not going to go up and down. It's going to give you constant duty cycle. This thing has a direct port manifold / air tank with an alloy extrusion that gives off convection cooling. Now, what that basically means in a nutshell is, if you were to take one of these manifolds and cut it in half and look inside, you'll see that it's a shell within a shell. And these dual fans blow through the manifolds to keep this thing cool, versus the competitor that basically blows between the manifolds. So you have these fans blowing right through these manifolds to keep this thing cool so you can use it longer. Now, this does have an 80 amp max draw. It does come with two 40 amp maxi blade fuses. As far as accessory ports, you get 4 at 1/8 inch BSPT and 5 1/4 inch BSPT. That's a lot of ports for you to plug into. This does have a safety relief valve at 155 psi, so once it reaches that, the safety relief valve will kick in and relieve some of that pressure. This also has a pressure cutout switch, comes on at 90 psi and shuts off at 120 psi, and there's also a thermal cutoff, so once this thing reaches 221 degrees Fahrenheit, this thing shuts down, and this thing comes with a 3-year warranty. Now for the air tank, this one also has a 3-year warranty. The capacity on this one is 5 liters or 1.32 US gallons. Maximum pressure on this is 150 psi, and as far as ports, you get 12 in total. You get 6 1/4 inch BSPT, so there's 2 on this side, 2 on this side, 1 on each end, and then you get 6 1/8 inch BSPT, so you get 2 on this side, 2 on this side, and 1 on each end, and you also get 2 moisture drain ports. I'm pretty sure you'll agree, pretty impressive. Let's get this thing installed because I cannot wait. Alright, so I just wanted to walk you guys through all the parts to come in this kit before we get to the install. Obviously, you get your air compressor. With that, you also get your 2 air filters that will be plugged right into there. We have the brackets right here, and then you get all the necessary hardware and bolts. Paper templates, just gonna come in really handy to make sure that all the holes line up. You get your installation and user manual. Do not throw this away even after the install. There's some pertinent information that you might need to reference in the future. Also, if you decide to add air lockers to the system, you're going to want to have this so you can see the wiring diagram for that. You have your 2 wiring harnesses, your unassembled pin connector, which we will need to assemble ourselves, your 2 40 amp maxi blade fuses, and your rocker power switch. The best way to think about this installation is in 3 stages. Electrical, we got to make sure that this thing has ample power. Mounting, we got to make sure that it's mounted somewhere where it's secure, and then air distribution. You want to make sure air is coming out of this thing, has no leaks, goes into the air tank, and then from the air tank it goes to wherever it is that you need air. Out of the twin air compressor, you get 2 ports. All you need to know is that this one is for power and this one is for the switch. Starting with the power, these reds will go to the positive terminal of your battery, and then the blacks will go to the negative terminal of your battery. Now the other end of this pin goes to this pin connector here, and you have to create that yourself. This is where I wish that TJM already had this pretty much made so that you could just plug and play. But I think the reason why they didn't do that was because they don't know exactly where you're going to be mounting your air compressor versus where your battery is. So they wanted to just give you the connector and you basically put in the wires yourself, and then that way you have enough length. Now moving over to the switch part, this is where things get a little bit confusing, and the reason why there are so many wires here is because this is for your air lockers as well. With this loom here that has all the different colored wires and whatnot, the black and red is going to get plugged into this black and red. Then coming out of that same side, you have one that's black and green and one that's black and yellow. These would plug into your air locker solenoids that you would attach to the air compressor. I don't have any air lockers, so we're gonna just roll this up and tie it off because we don't need it. Now follow that all the way to the other end, and that goes to a 4-pin connector right here that hooks up to this other wiring harness right there. And then when you follow that, you have this blue and red. The red goes to a power supply so that when you turn on your switch, the light turns on. Then off that same side, you get these 2 bundles. This one says front switch, this one says rear switch. These are for your air lockers as well, so we're gonna just put these to the side. We're not gonna need them. And then this one says isolating switch. This is for your air compressor, and you plug it to the back of this switch, and you can just look at the instructions to basically tell you which plug goes into which terminal. So this is where my troubles began. I was attempting to assemble the connector that attaches to the power plug on the air compressor. This was that disassembled connector I showed earlier. You have to provide your own 8-gauge wires, and the ones I got from my nearby auto store was too stiff, and the pins that came with the connector were too small to crimp cleanly. The pins kept coming off and it wasn't secure. In retrospect, I should have just soldered the connections together, but I had already broken 2 pins by then. Okay, look, these little pins that they give you to attach to the wire and put through this connector is just small. This is 8-gauge wire, and this is not going to fit that. And every time I tried, it won't clamp completely, and I already broke 2 of them, and they don't give you any extras. You get 5 total. I need to order a different kind of connector. I'm gonna go get some Anderson plugs or something. We'll be back. So what I ended up doing was cutting off the original connector on the air compressor and converting it to Anderson plugs. Anderson plugs were such a game changer. The pins it came with were much more accommodating to 8-gauge wire and much easier to crimp. Anderson plugs have become my favorite go-to, and if you want to know more about them, just do some research so you can see how easy they are to assemble and use. Once I had that converted, I was now able to make the harness that plugs into it. With the connector issue finally resolved, I can now mount the air compressor. I decided to mount the air compressor in the drawer system compartment I was using to store tools before. Now it'll be dedicated to the air compressor and accessories. To make sure I mount it properly, I used the template provided to drill the holes in the appropriate places. I also drilled out 2 large holes for venting and to run wires through. But here's where my second set of troubles began. I was having a difficult time trying to keep the air compressor lifted while positioning the side brackets and then running the bolts through the holes and into the wall without nuts and washers and spacers falling off. One thing that did help was I found a piece of wood that I used to keep the compressor elevated as I managed the rest. After some time and frustration, I was able to get the top bolts through, which made the other 4 easier to align. Alright, I am convinced that this install just wants to challenge me at like every stage. So here is the setup. This air compressor has this cage that wraps around it. This cage has 3 holes on each side, and if you were to mount this on the ground, then no problem, it would mount up really easily. But if you plan to mount it vertically like I did, you need to use these vertical brackets here, and it needs to be elevated like this because you need this gap at the bottom for venting, and that's what these vertical brackets kind of do. It helps keep it propped up, but it also gives it a contact to the ground so that this thing is stable. Well, trying to mount this upwards, the compressor being pretty heavy, and then having to get a bolt to go through the 3 holes on this side, the 3 holes on that side, through these vertical brackets, and then through the wall so you can put a nut on the other side, gets to be very difficult. The instructions say you could take the cage off and then mount just the cage with these brackets. It would make it so much easier, and then just drop the air compressor in. But the problem is this cage is held on with some bolts at the bottom, which would be very hard for me to find, especially way back there. That is more difficult to get to than the 3 bolts that are here. Anyway, at least it's mounted up, it's secure, it's not going anywhere. Now let's get this thing powered up, and please let there be no issues with this part. Now to power up this compressor, I'm going to be plugging right into my power distribution block that I had built for the accessories that I have inside the vehicle. This is not something you have to build. Just think of this as an extension of my battery. I have these 4-gauge wires that are going directly to the battery in the engine bay, and over in the engine bay there is a 100 amp circuit breaker tied to these. So if anything overloads the system past 100 amps, that circuit breaker will shut off. So it's definitely safe to plug into here. Plus, with this being 4-gauge, it's going to give us enough ample power to run this compressor. If you do want to build something like this, I did a video on it. I'll link it in the description below. Now to attach the air compressor, I'm going to be putting some ring terminals at the end of those wires and going directly to these terminals. You don't want to go into these smaller terminals. These are low amperage terminals. You want to go directly to the source. But before it goes to the compressor itself, we're going to put the maxi fuses that TJM sent. They're right here. We're going to plug it right over here, and having it here, I'll be able to monitor, make sure everything is running smoothly. Here I'm just adding those ring terminals to the end of the harness we created earlier. There will be 5 total, 2 black 8-gauge terminals, 1 black 16-gauge terminal, and 2 red 8-gauge terminals. I also made 2 short red ones with 8-gauge wire that has ring terminals on both ends because these will go from the power distribution block to the maxi blade fuses. Once completed, I just had to run the wires to the power distribution block, plug in the connectors and switches, and then test if it works. Alright, hard part is finally done. The air compressor has been mounted, it's been wired up, it's working. Man, what a journey. Now we can finally move on to the easy part, I hope, which is air distribution. Now if you wanted to, you could just plug up your air hose directly to the air compressor. You're good to go, you have air right away. But we're going to take that a step further by adding an air tank and a remote air kit. The air compressor will fill this, and then we have air ready to go at all times. And then the remote air kit will allow us to put the input or for the air hose wherever we want. So for the remote air kit, you get your hose, and you can cut this up to any size that you might need. Get some zip ties, and you get a whole bunch of fittings. So you get 4 elbow fittings like this. You get a couple of straight fittings like this. You also get this holder that will basically hold a chuck. This is your quick release chuck, so you can plug right into that. And then they give you this, and you put this together into here, kind of lock that in place. Then you can screw this onto there, and you can mount this anywhere. I won't be using this though because I have another way I'm going to be doing this. And you can also put in this, which is a cap, and that'll just allow you to kind of protect your chuck when you're not using it. Now what's really cool about these are what's called push-in fittings. So instead of you having to put a hose and getting some sort of clamp to clamp it together, this pneumatic hose goes right into there, and it'll lock in place. You just have to push it all the way in. There are these grooves, they're like these teeth that once you push them in, it'll just bite, and it'll stay that way, so you don't have to do anything else, which I think is really cool. So that's a really cool kit, and I can't wait to show you what I plan to do with this thing. And I already know some of you might be mad. The air tank has adjustable brackets that allow you to loosen and slide it along the rails according to your application, or move them to the other rails around the tank. I'll be mounting this to the MOLLE panel sideways, and I want the logo to show, so I'm putting the brackets towards the rear instead of the bottom. I also aligned the brackets to line up with the holes on my MOLLE panel. Alright, so remember when I said that I'm going to be doing something that might make you mad? Well, here it is. This air chuck is actually going to be located on the outside of the vehicle, which means we have to drill a hole through the hardtop. I mean, honestly, this hardtop already has so many holes in it, from the roof rack to the water port. Like, what's one more hole? I just think it's going to be super convenient having this on the outside, because then I can fill up all my tires without having to route hoses from the inside. And with the water port being here, I can DIY a smaller hose that will go from this chuck to the water port and keep that water port pressurized when we're at camp. Using a step-up drill bit, I drilled out a hole slowly until it was large enough for the adapter to barely fit. It needs to be snug to keep water from leaking into the vehicle. I also used some RTV silicone for more protection. By keeping it very snug, I allowed the threads to basically drill itself into the hardtop, creating a super watertight seal. Then I tightened it from the inside. Now we just have to screw in the coupler, and I can't say this enough, do not over tighten or you'll break the thread. Ask me how I know. After all the struggles I've faced so far, it was finally time to route the airline. I routed it from the air compressor to the air tank using the connectors, and then from the air tank to the port leading to the outside, and the install was finally finished late into the night. Alright, let's just do a quick walkthrough. There's the air compressor. From the air compressor we have 2 harnesses. One goes to the switch, which I have routed all behind here, and to the switch right there, and that's where I am powering this thing from. The other harness, we went and created those 2 Anderson ports, which is right there. One has all red, the other one has all black, and that goes directly to the power distribution block. Here's that other harness that goes to the switch. Now on the power distribution block side, I know this looks like a jumbled mess, but that's only because I have such limited space here. Once I get a dual battery system, I can kind of set this up to where it's like nice and cleaner and all spread out a little bit more. These are the wires coming from the air compressor. The reds go to the maxi fuses and the blacks go to the ground. From the maxi fuses, it goes to this ring terminal there, and that goes directly to the positive terminal there. On the air side of things, I have an elbow fitting there, goes out through that hole. Then it comes out right there, snakes through behind the seat, goes to another elbow fitting in the air tank. Now from the air tank, it comes out the side and into that port leading to the outside where we just plugged up our air hose right here. Now you'll notice that the cap that I had that covers this is no longer there. And the reason why is because this is the chuck that came with this air hose kit, which I'll be talking about in about a couple videos from now. And they fit together really nicely. But the chuck that came with the remote air kit doesn't fit this hose. I'm not sure why TJM has two different size chucks. I'm hitting them up about it now and kind of getting a confirm on why that is. But if you are going to get the remote air kit, you can't use the chuck that it comes with if you're going to use their air hose kit. They're two different size chucks and it won't fit in this one, but it does fit in that one. Unfortunately, that one is smaller, that it doesn't fit this cap, it just falls off. But either way, we're gonna go ahead and test it out now and see if this whole thing actually works. 3, 2, 1. Where do I even begin? Definitely top 5, one of the most challenging installs I've done. And really, it's not even a tough install. It's just an air compressor that you need to power up. But it's just all these little things kept happening that just kept delaying the project even more. Now, is this on TJM? Absolutely not. Most of this is on me. It's me trying to manage all these moving parts of this install while trying to film the install, while at the same time I'm still learning and I'm rushing through things, and that's how it ended up taking a lot longer than it should have. Now, is there anything that I feel TJM could maybe improve on when it comes to this product? Yeah, a couple. One being that connector that connects to the air compressor. They give it to you disassembled. Like, it would be great to just have that already connected with some wires long enough to reach wherever your power source is. And we could always just cut it down to size, but at least we don't have to pin our own connectors. Now, the other thing are those vertical brackets. If I could make a suggestion, the way I would have it is have those vertical brackets be mounted to the air compressor separately, where you could basically mount it off the vehicle. You would take the air compressor, mount it to those vertical brackets, get that all cinched up and tight, then take that whole piece and bring it to your vehicle, and there'll be 6 different holes by which you mount the whole thing to, because then now you can kind of just stand the air compressor where you want it, push it up against whatever wall you're going to be attaching it to, then get your 6 bolts and mount that whole thing, and it would be so much easier. But I feel like this is my Sistine Chapel, you know, that thing that just challenges you at every single step. And we go through that a lot, especially with installs. Like, you just want to not do it anymore. You're like, this is not worth it, but you keep pushing and you're learning. And then afterwards you look at it and you're like, thank God I didn't give up, because now I look and I'm like, wow, I actually have an air system in the Jeep now. There are so many advantages of having like an air system, an onboard air system in the vehicle, and I am so glad I didn't give up on it, because at the end of the day, it really is not on TJM. It was just me needing to take my time and needing to persevere through it. On top of that, I mean, if you look at this thing, it looks sick. Like, just the way it all looks together, the air compressor with the air tank and then the hose going to the outside. What a great system. It works really, really well also. Like, it's super powerful, and I'm gonna be doing a video comparing this with a single air compressor in a few weeks. But next week, I'm gonna be doing the video for the single air compressor, which means I'm gonna be doing all of this again. But I feel like I know a lot more this time. If you did enjoy it though, or if you found it useful, please make sure you smash, actually, don't smash, persevere in hitting that like button, even if it's a challenge. Subscribe to our channel, and also hit that notification bell so we can let you be aware of videos when they come out. Also, if it moves you, support us on Patreon. It gives you access to all of our videos earlier than everyone else. And also don't forget to follow us on Instagram at Baptism Overland. My name is Asia Sampson, and I'll see you in part 2.